Alright folks, welcome to this exciting video where you once again join me on the beautiful landscape of Scotland. And for today's adventure, we're about to punch on to the top of these hills here, and we're about to go and document a plane crash from around the World War II time period. It was actually a Vickers Wellington, and I want to give a special shout out to Roy, who lives in Orkney. He actually gave me a copy of this book years ago, which I've kept a hold of, and it actually gives you some interesting information. And when I was flicking through today to find out about this plane crash, it's actually hard to get details on the exact, like there was apparently 4 plane crashes roughly up here. So here we are folks, this is the start of the incredible walk here, and this is actually the path which takes you up to Loch Wirral. There's a path going away up there, that direction. I don't know if it comes out on the camera. We're going right up there, round the edge of that cliff on the highest peak, and then right over that direction to see this incredible location and to remember what all went on and how many lives and stuff was sadly lost on these Scottish hills in plane crashes and military aircraft. Obviously the technology of navigation was so early when things like this occurred that if there was a foggy night and your instruments weren't reading correctly, sometimes the hill would just come out of nowhere. And it's amazing to think. Sometimes it was, they would recover the main parts off of the planes and then they would just leave the rest of the structure. It'll be interesting to see. One time me and Highlander actually did try and go up to this place, and we got just about stranded on this hill, and it was the closest we've ever been to like totally getting stuck out in the wilds. So yeah, this is like round 2 basically for this one folks, so let's get into action. Check it out folks, look, we're up on the higher hill now overlooking these crazy lands at the other side of Glen Clova. The car's a tiny speck at the bottom of the hill. We've come so high up on this path, I just thought I would update the video. It's getting more windy and we're almost at Loch Wirral. Check it out folks, we've made it to the shores of Loch Wirral. There's actually a couple of lochs up here in the beautiful lands of Scotland and Glen Clova. One of them's Brandy, it's far more popular and quite touristy. And then a couple of miles further down the glen, this incredible scene of Loch Wirral. This is kind of along our track. We're away to go on the path that leads up and right along the ridge of that hill there, and basically on to the far moors and hilllands of Scotland. There's actually stone remains up there as well. I'm not sure if it's man-made or built. It's so windy here folks, I just thought I would throw the camera on. Look, there's a wee bothy here. Years ago it used to be a place you could take like shelter or refuge in a storm, but then people started coming out here and like hanging about for the towns and the cities and destroying it and leaving all their litter. So the gamekeepers in the state basically just had to lock the doors. But it still obviously is gamekeeping territory in the lands of Scotland. Just what a scene folks. I love bypassing places like this on our way on these adventures. So high up in the Scottish hills, little areas of landscape on the way to the history, and it shows the crazy landscapes that those planes were flying over that were kind of crashing in these hills. They must have been looking down thinking, whoa, like, yeah, it's interesting to see the stones on that hill. Kind of is like they've been constructed there, but it could be natural. It's hard to know, so many hundreds of years have passed. Yeah, look how clear the water is there folks. Look at this, we've punched on round the side from Loch Wirral, and look at this. There's a view looking over to Loch Brandy. That's at the other side, where you can see that avalanche on the hill at the far side there. Loch Brandy's down in that hollow, and we're basically going up this hill here still. Loch Wirral's down in that wee hollow. Just check the view. I thought I would just throw the camera on folks, you know how it is, update the video, update the mission. And now we can see over the top of these hills to the far lands of Scotland. Perthshire over this direction. Probably when we go over this top of these hills it'll be like Aberdeenshire and stuff we can see in the far distance. Look at this folks, this is the wildest of most desolate landscapes as far as the eye can see. And we've basically punched on up the hill. Loch Wirral's kind of over that direction down there. We've only seen an option for one more path. That was the reason I wanted to come over here and have a look into this piece of land. We're basically searching now for the aircraft. We maybe have to keep going up that way, I was thinking, but it seems to be that the path's leading the wrong way to where we need to go. I do apologise for wind and audio at this moment. I was just wanting to overlook this lower piece of the glen. Check it out, we're actually punching on following this fence line, folks, and I think it's over this general direction. The valley I was looking into a minute ago is over that way, and we've basically been going left and right on the land, and this is the closest thing we've got to a main road in the area we're walking. We're literally just walking over the hill in a random direction over to where we believe the old aeroplane crashed onto the hill, and it is pretty far. You can see how far away the lands of Angus is down there. I can actually hear an aeroplane. That's very fitting for the location we're going to. I can see other walkers as well, and potentially that's a proper path over there that we should have been on, but you know how it is on the channel, folks. We often never know where we're actually going. We just go left and right. This is actually a peat bog that would normally be super wet and dangerous to walk through, but because of the recent dry weather we've had for such a long period, it's made it a bit easier to navigate. This is Scotland, folks. This is what a peat bog looks like when you're in the middle of it. Sometimes there's massive areas that nothing grows. The ground drops as the vegetation dies in the extremely damp environment. That's why it leaves areas looking like this. And sometimes on a wet day it's a dangerous place to walk because you can get deep holes. Mission update, folks, video update. Check out this incredible landscape that we stand within. This is actually the big hollow down here where Loch Wirral is, and the correct path we should have come is probably that one over there. But we've basically followed this fence line right around. We're still punching on up this kind of track over the hill, but look at that view. We can just see so far today in every direction. Massive cliffs and hills of Scotland, and it's amazing that we've just been walking up the uphill constantly since we left the car, and we're still not even at the top of these hills, and that's how high they are. They're just massive. That's why sometimes planes would hit them when they were flying in dangerous conditions. Highlander's got the map here, and he was saying this is Ben Tirran, this hill. Ben Tirran. I'm sorry about the wind, folks. Look, there's a cairn which marks the highest point on the hill, and from here we can see miles in all directions. And I believe the aircraft crash is over here. It's over this direction somewhere. Is that silver area? That kind of grey, kind of stony area maybe. I think we just need to go to that track looking bitty. This is mad, folks. I do apologise for the wind if it is coming through on the audio. We're so high on these hills right here. I can't even exaggerate to you the weather, but I just absolutely love it. I mean, look, you can see the North Sea in there. That's how far you can see. Wow. I'm just blown away by the scenes as well as the wind up here. Look at this, folks, random find of the day. It's another pyramid, and we found a pyramid a few weeks ago on the adventure. This one's a little bit smaller, and I think it's something for maybe feeding the hill birds or like the grouse, but it's funny to see it, a tiny little pyramid way out here where there's nothing else. And it's just funny because of the Glen pyramid we found. It's random in Scotland to see stuff like that. And yeah, we're punching on over this wild hilltop moorland right now. We've got the North Sea way out on the right hand side, and then the wild mountains and hills on the left, and we're kind of in this central bit on top of these mad hills, so high in altitude. I think in my one of the last videos when I was up Glen I was saying like 2,000 metres, but I was actually meaning feet above sea level. I was getting confused, folks, or in the moment not even thinking about it. But yeah, these places probably like 2,000 feet. I'm not even sure above sea level for height. But the altitude's crazy. Often going on adventures way up here. It's a different world, way up at the high level of Scotland here. Mission update, folks. This is a true mission, and it's a classic on the channel, this adventure. Cutting left and right over these lands. We've basically been punching down this hill from the last clip over, because I think we can see the crash site there on the far hill. I can't even speak. I just ate a Dairy Lee Lunchable, folks, which was a tasty treat here. I got a wee bit of energy back for this walk because we've just been walking non-stop. But that's kind of what it's like trying to find these places. There's only so many hours in the day, and we're so far from a main road or a track at this point. It's absolutely incredible. Look at this, folks, there's a creature down here. It's a newt. I think that's what it is. Look at it running. It's like a wee lizard. I'm sure they're called newts. Check him out, running and wriggling away. Hello! See that, folks? That's the kind of wildlife you get out here. We're so far out in the middle of this place. I think they quite like the damp, wet, bogland environments, and he'll go around catching little flies and beasties and eating them. Look at this, folks, we're just taking a couple of seconds here to catch our breath, and look at the character of this peat bog. Look at that. Way out here for miles. And we've made it across the wettest kind of bit. And we're down out of the wind. The crash site is literally just up over this next ridge, so it's so cool. We're getting so close. Look, I don't know if that's just stones at the far side or actually sun. Sun shining there. Could be, the stone's quite shiny in this area. So one of the coolest things ever, folks, we've sighted the aircraft. It's just over here. We're now coming over this ridge in the land, walking for miles over these hills, no path. We've been lucky today because there's been no ticks within the grass. We have seen those other creatures running about that was cool. But yes, we're nearly there, we've made it. Check it out, we're on the final frontier, folks, and the plane's actually up on this ridge. There's big deep holes here, and we actually saw a hare running into here a minute ago. Yeah, I was just away to click record and I went absolutely flying because my foot went into a hole in the heather. Wow, what a landscape, folks. And you can see by how remote it is, that's the reason they didn't often recover much from these sites. And often people would perish. Sometimes they wouldn't even be sure what direction to go if they had crashed and they survived walking in these lands. Wow. Yeah, water's running under there but you can't see it. And that's what you get in Scotland, folks. It's like hidden waterways. Hear it right under there. Could be 10 foot deep for all we know. So I'm actually putting this little bit in the middle of the video here, folks, to give you an idea of the plane we're about to see on this adventure when we get to the aeroplane. Because at the time of the Explorer, I didn't actually know the correct history of the plane, and I didn't even know that it was going to be a Vickers Wellington bomber until we were pretty much away to head up the path and found out the information. So I thought I would add this section in. I wrote it on a bit of paper to get the information correct. I believe it was a Vickers Wellington Mark III, and that's judging from the radial engines that were actually found up on the hill, which were likely to be Bristol Hercules 3 engines, which were 14 cylinders, 1,425 horsepower radial engines. And it was actually, those planes were rare at that time. They were first designed in 1937. That's when the prototypes first came on the go, and it was designed by a guy who used to make airships and stuff at earlier times through the 1920s into the 30s. And he came up with what is known as a geodetic structure, and that's the aluminium frame that we can actually see in this video when we get to the aircraft crash. And another thing is, I was saying when I explored, oh, it doesn't have the aluminium frame or like the sheeting left behind on the hill, but it actually turns out it was a fabric frame, a fabric, I can't even speak, folks. It was a fabric covering over the geodetic structure. So that's why I thought I would put that in and tell you the history, because when I was looking at it I was unsure of what I was looking at, but it is a proper British plane that served Britain and the RAF through the whole of World War II. And it actually, at the time, we theorised if it had a tail gunner, but they actually had a nose gunner, a tail gunner, and also guns midway up the plane above the engine. And there was a famous time, New Zealand, a gentleman who was from New Zealand was actually flying one of the planes, or he was in the crew, and the plane went on fire, and they cut a hole in the side of the plane, and he was like out on the wing trying to put the fire out. And that was the Wellington bomber, and that is the incredible famous British plane that we're about to see on the hill. At the time I was so gassed out and tired when we got to it. We had walked for 3 hours uphill. I just thought I'll put this clear history in, and then when you see it, you know what it is. Wellington bomber, Vickers Wellington. So yeah, let's get into the action. Back to the action, folks, out on that wild hill when we actually find the plane. So this is the first time I've ever walked to and documented a military plane which has been downed or which has crashed in the lands here. So it's interesting to see. Apparently it was a Vickers Wellington bomber, and look how desolate and far and remote it is. We were over at the top of that hill no so long ago, and we've basically come over from that direction, and here we are, folks. Check it out. Remains of the engine and some bits of the plane, the frame. Whoa. Yeah, none of this gets salvaged because it would be so difficult for them to carry it all out of here with no trucks. Look at it, the big engines. Oh, we've literally walked so far here. It's incredible. I need to put my bag down here, folks, and chill out for a second. Wow, I love to see it. I always love seeing what was done. Like, we've documented so many airfields and stuff. This gives you an idea of the sort of planes that may have been taken off and landing from areas like that. And look, there's just little devices and little parts of the plane up here on the hill. Obviously, you didn't want to poke about and be too disrespectful considering of the horrific scene here of the plane crash, but it's interesting to see some of the devices maybe that's here on the soil. Look at that, old electrical connectors. Little parts of the plane, totally melted. That's a valve of some sort. Wow, folks, look at the big chunks. Look, that's the landing gear there. That's like hydraulic cylinders. That must have been the landing gear. It's so interesting to see it up close, folks. Look, that's been like a fuel tank sender, potentially there, for the top of the fuel tank, or fuel related. Now look at that, a big bit of the original aeroplane. Wow, I just can't even believe it. Like, I'm just looking around at all the little details of the history. Look at that, the wee parts. Look, there's actually a serial number or whatever stamped on there. L7190 into there. That's incredible. Look, this has got like a thread, and it must be stainless steel because it still looks brand new compared to the rest of the wreckage. Yeah, the engines are absolutely massive, and there here is a scar or skeleton of the history that tells the sad story. I think one of these planes on these hills was actually full of American soldiers after the war that were going to be going home, and the plane actually came down in bad weather. But there's so many planes and stuff crashed on the hills of Scotland that it's interesting to come and maybe document them as the years go on. And shout out Roy that gave me that book, because that gives me an idea of more of the information as well about the plane crashes and where they are, and the central Scotland section's kind of the area we're in today, I would say. And there was actually a lot in the area between here and like Fettercairn, Edsall and other areas. Up Glen Clova alone there was 4 or 5 plane crashes in the war. Wow, some of that stuff is like massive chunks of the engine. Look how it's melted. So that shows there was a ferocious fire here at one moment when it first crashed. Look, there's one of the serial numbers as well. Somebody's put a poppy on here in remembrance. Like I say, we come with the greatest of respects to those who serve and those who did serve. I love to document as much of the history as I can on the channel over the years when I'm going around, so we don't forget all that was actually done for our freedom at a certain time in this beautiful landscape. Look at this is almost like a brake caliper of some sort. I wonder if it's a park brake, because it's actually threaded here, you can see it, and it squeezes together as it turns. But I'm not sure, that's some big chunks that's between what might be the brake pads. There could have been other systems that adopted a similar design. I'm not too familiar with aircraft design. Did you think this was the tail section, or is that somewhere else? There's another area with debris around here. We'll go and take a look at it in a minute. But I think this is maybe the main body of the plane here, with like the landing gear and stuff. And this must have been the area of impact here on the hill. And sometimes because of the aviation fuel, no plants and shrubs grow within the area. I believe at this site, the gentlemen on board the plane did sadly lose their lives. And it is just such a desolate, wild land. And like I said earlier in the video, if you did crash in an area like this, you wouldn't necessarily know which way to walk to get there. Like the quickest route back to safety or to like population. Civilization's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, look, throughout the ground here, the plane is down within it. Nature takes back over. Yeah, there's other people walking across the top. Look at this, is that old Americans or designers? It's just a coincidence the way it looks. Wow. There's just so many little bits, individual things that were doing a job on the plane. Yeah, it's just so many individual pieces. Oh look, there's a plaque here. Look, here we go folks, the plaque is in really poor condition unfortunately. It says, in memory of Sergeant Observer Joseph Weatherson. I think it says Royal Air Force there, but it's really hard to see. All this writing here is fully just disappeared kind of with the years. Remembered by his family. Yeah, so this could be a gentleman related to the wartime efforts or whatever that went on in here. And look at the size of the fuselage here around me. It's the word fuselage. I can hardly say it, folks. Yeah, it's just such a jumble and muddle of pieces, and it shows you how the plane airframe here has been constructed. Underneath the outer skin of the plane, it's got that strong aircraft aluminium body, and so much has been done. Look, that could be a rudder, the pole there that controls the rudders, I'm not sure. Wow, this is just breathtaking to see. And then the fact those engines are there, it's mad, like the size of them, the weight, and maybe when it clipped the ground they'd been trying to pull up, and then obviously that's how the two pieces of plane, maybe in the different area of the hill, part of it maybe just kept drifting or fell off first. Oh aye, online folks, Highlanders saying the tail section fell off and the plane just glided in and landed here. And look, here's a piece of like a banjo fitting, it must be a hydraulic pipe of some sort. And then look here, this has been almost like a lever, like a handbrake lever shaped item. And it just thinks the crew in the cockpit may have been sitting in this one area. Look, that's almost been like a dashboard. Check it out, folks. I was thinking that's like a bullet has gone through it, but it could be melted from the heat. Folks, the scene of history today. I'm just wanting to take it all in and not miss any of the cool wee details. Maybe like a little part of the plane, an interesting little detail of the plane that lies here within the ground. And yeah, the fact we tried to walk here one time before, and in hindsight we were so far from it. But it is so far we need to walk to punch on back out of here, so it's been worth coming. I'm seeing so much, and I'm wanting to go and see if we can see the tail section as well. There's so much more here. Look, this could be off the back of the wing, like I was calling it the rudder. It looks like it may, I don't even know how that would have worked. I was thinking it may have pivoted on that bit. But look, there's something else. Look, a control lever. That's maybe for controlling the rudder. Yeah, look at this, folks. This is obviously the, we were thinking for the wheel, and that shows that everything's got these bits on it. I better grab my backpack, folks, down here. Look, there's another pipe fitting or something. Tank fitting. The aluminium's just fully melted off, and it's hard to even tell its original shape. And that shows the ferocious fire's been focused in certain areas here. Look at that, there's like brass bits and stuff left within that. What does that say on it? Wow, there's actually stamps or like writing on it, but it's hard to read. Wow folks, I'm just blown away by what we're seeing. Look at these bits. I wonder if that's been like munitions or something it's been carrying. Look at that. That's massive chunks of steel. No, unless that's some sort of heat shields from the engine, potentially. And look, you can see how it looks like the fuel's almost been running down this bit, away from the site. It's almost like a river here of an area that can't grow. Anyway, let's pick up my bag. I hope there's no ticks on it. Yeah, there's so many little bits. Look at that there. I wonder what that's been. My shadow's at a poor angle here. Look at this. What bit of the plane has that been, folks? Look at this. Oh my goodness. I keep saying look at this and then look at this, but check out the shape of this. Oh, this must be the fairings that go around the engine for sure. Because look, it's the same diameter. Maybe air intakes. And then look where that stuff's flowed away from the site. And then there's so much more little historical nuggets over here. Let's go folks, let's punch on. Yeah, look, here's some of the tanks. I think they're fuel tank senders which pump the fuel out. Look, more levers. Look at that, the wee control levers right there. I'm just blown away by what we're seeing today folks. I'm just taking my time because we've walked so far. It's interesting just to record every detail like that. Just look at it from here. It's such a sad scene. Such a sad historical scene here on the hill. Anyway, let's take a look at this tail section. Highlander's saying there's more bits lying over here. So let's have a look. Oh, aye, sheets of steel. Aye, well, aluminium. It's maybe blowing with the wind. Do you reckon the tail section's here? 200 metres folks, you know how it is. Another little punch over this land. Look at this folks, we've made it over to the tail section of the aircraft, which lies down within here. So the tail section had come off and the rest of the plane had gone over and sadly crashed at the other side of there in a ferocious ball of fire. Look at the land here, you wouldn't even believe it if you didn't see it folks. So check it out folks, look at the size of it. This is the tail section here. The Vickers Wellington tail end. Yeah, what's that mean? Is that the controls for operating like the rear rudders and stuff? Look, the pivot on here, it shows like how lightweight everything was. Oh, it was maybe feeding hydraulic supply to these, because I think these rotated at the back. And then look at this here. There's all these little bits like chambers. I was thinking that's because each wing was like a fuel tank, but that'll be the skin off the back wings. Look at the way these rivets hold the metal together folks. It's incredible to think they had to make it as lightweight as possible when they were actually designing and building these planes. And look at these panels here, you can see a slight remains of potentially the original paintwork, but it's all lightweight aluminium. That's really easy to pick up, and that was so the plane was obviously really light. And it's the same with these frames, these wings. Such a big piece. Highlander was just theorising that potentially there was a gunner at the back of these airplanes, but I wasn't sure on a Vickers Wellington if there was. Oh aye, there's wood within there, there's been wood.
So it's been like you can walk over that.
Yeah, wow. Look at that, the old bit where the electrical wire's been connected in. There's been wiring and stuff on it. That's crazy, all the little individual bits to make the frame, and then mass produced at the time of war. Creating things like this. And look how the stainless steel pins are still in there like the day they were put in. For holding that on, it's a dual pin. Riveted over. I love seeing the construction of this because I'm feeling like a mechanical job and stuff. Like I love seeing the way the things are put together, the technology that was involved with building an aircraft. Look, I think this would be the leading edge of the aeroplane here. I think people's been actually scratching their name into the plane, but we always come with the greatest respect of stuff like this. It's like a memorial basically on the hill here, this plane. That gives you an idea of the size of the planes as well. If this is the wee tail section, shows you how much of the plane's probably corroded away and rotted over the years since the war time when this crashed. Look at the difference between the steel and then the aluminium. Look, there's another part number down there for some of the stuff. Whatever that's been. Wow, I love to see that stuff. What is it?
The amount of rivets used just on one of these.
I know, and a lot of them's those lightweight, tiny little rivets. Holding so much together. Other things, it's the steel rivets and the clamps and then the pipes. Yeah, everything's got a name or a number and a code on it, and it's all just built from a pack. Often at the time of war, they built things that was quick and easy, obviously, so they could hit on a production line, mass producing it. And that's why you had those lightweight airframes with aluminium. A lot of planes at that time still had a lot of wooden components in them as well. Wow, what a scene. Look at that, folks, the plane with this craziness behind it. Check it out, folks, I'm going to catch this from every angle for the thumbnail image of the video. To see that sticking up in the land. I used to see stuff like that and think, oh, I really want to go and visit that. But I never knew like where the crashes were and stuff. When I got that book for Roy, it was really interesting to see how many crashes there had been in the land, and then to come here and see this today. Such a special scene of history and aviation, and I absolutely love planes. All the way up to the modern day fighter jets that still fly over my head when I'm kicking about. I love to see it. And it's cool to remember what was done for the country and the freedom of the country not so long ago, when planes like this sadly went down and people lost their lives. I'm pretty sure the story was they were on their way home after the war, or right at the end of the war, and they sadly had never made it. But a lot of flights kind of struggled. These are such wild lands, you get low fogs and crazy like cross winds, and often the weather can change so fast. Obviously I'm not a pilot, but I'm sure if your navigation equipment started malfunctioning, you would struggle to see where the hills were. And these hills are so high. 1942, Highlanders saying. So this must not be the one where the American soldiers were flying home at the end of the war. It can't have been. This must be a different one. A Vickers Wellington. I'm sure that's a British bomber's plane, isn't it? Rather than an American one anyway. Pretty sure this is what the British were cranking out back in the day. The Vickers was an aircraft company. And I'm sure, did they not partner up with like Vickers Siddeley or whatever at one time? I'm not sure. There was so many companies back making things for the war effort in places like this, folks. That's the character of it. Left behind in such a remote land. That's crazy to see the airframe, folks. I wasn't even sure what to expect with a plane crash. So to see this and then to see the engines, incredible scenes. So there we are, folks, a bit of history, something different on the channel, and a crashed aircraft from World War II. Highlander was saying there like 1942, so it's interesting to put a time frame on that. Everything I was thinking about on like with the American soldiers flying home, that must be one of the other crash sites in Clova, because I'm sure there was a thing in the Courier about a plane crash and that's what they were saying. But look at this one, folks, this is mad. What a scene. I've not actually learnt about a Vickers plane like to that order. I should have learnt about the mechanical side of it, and I could have gone more in depth and actually knowing the individual parts I was looking at. But I've only been thinking about coming here for like, it has been years since we first planned it, but coming here today I hadn't actually researched thoroughly. I just love that scene right there with the wing just sticking up. If you were just on a random walk you would think, what is this? It's just so far, are we out of building or anything? We're thinking there is a path up here which is different to the path that we came in on, so we're going to punch on up there and try and get an easier way out of here. That's crazy to see those big engines, the big aeroplane structure left here today. Obviously being aluminium, super corrosive, and a lot of it disappears really quick. Another thing, a lot of it looked like it had melted, and sometimes it's harder to figure out what you're seeing when the shape of it is altered so much by the fire. It's also cool to see how the stainless steel bits remain intact. Yeah, this is crazy here, look at this. This is actually a dangerous peat bog here, so we need to be careful. Look, there's super wet bits there and they can be really deep. If anybody walks to this plane crash, be prepared for an absolute mad walk, because this has been crazy today. All sorts of hilltop terrain underfoot, and that's how we didn't hang about long. We looked at the details of the crash, remembered the history of it, and now we need to keep punching on because we're limited obviously to get off this hill before it gets to night. We've obviously got the sun still well high in the sky, but we're basically so far up in these hills, no path heading through these peat bogs. If you went in the wrong bit of these, you could be up to your waist or even worse in the water. Muddy water as well, like quicksand. So as you can see folks, even from up here, we're hoping there's a path that goes along by that fence, but even from up here you cannot see that plane crash. It was super hard to get to, and that's what makes it cool to share places like that on this channel. Wait, look at that hare running across. Yeah, we love going to the places it's hard to get to and telling the stories of history that's hardly known about. A Vickers Wellington crashing here, 1942, going down in a ball of flames. Judging from what I'm looking at the crash site, the amount of melted metal and the way that it looks like fuel and stuff's been running down out of that area. Whew, yeah, this is intense. Look at this land folks, we need to keep punching kind of that direction, but we've basically come straight up that hill. We're kind of going 90 degrees, but we're always just kind of reading the land, putting one foot in front of the other and try to pick the best way through, navigating using the land itself folks. So we're now heading up this track by this fence line folks, and it's typical with our adventures. I can actually see the plane crash this way, but when we came in to try and find and locate this plane, we went right up that ridge line to the top of that far hill and then down that hill into that area through the boggy lands. And it's crazy to think we could have just come straight down here, it would have been quicker, but we're often just learning the landscape and picking our way through it as we go. The landscape over here is so incredible. There's big cliffs and vast lands, and I was just theorising that could be Mount Keene there, that big tall mountain. Anyway, we're punching on up folks, you know how it is. I just thought I would update you and tell you how much extra mileage we walked on the way into that crash site to see it for this aspect. No other channel's got as much incredible Scottish landscapes and abandoned history as this one folks, and today's video proves it once again. Check it out, a dual electric fence here, and I think it's to control the deer and stuff out on the hill, maybe the sheep as well. But yeah, it's totally wiggling about. Yeah, let's head over folks. What an adventure coming into places like this folks. You know how it is on the channel. Every week I love going to see history and places like that we've never seen. A plane like that, it's just mad to think. At that time, the horrific scene when it first came down. Now such a peaceful, remote, tranquil land. Back then, such a ferocious fire and the scene of horror. So far from, like, this is still the closest thing to a road that we've got. We're punching on towards the track. It is literally miles we had to walk into that abandoned landscape to see the abandoned plane shell. And that's why so much is left there, including the engines. It's so difficult to extract stuff like that from the scene of the accident. So on the way in folks, we came from this direction and we punched on right up to the top of that hill and went right down there into the valley. And from here, now I know where the plane crash is, I can actually see it. But on the way back here, we're actually going a different route, which I think takes us over closer to Loch Wirral. And I'm going over one of these deer fences on the land, and just look at it, we're coming back over to the side where Glen Clova is. There's loads of these wee lochs and waterways just kind of stuck up on the hill here. What a scene of Scotland once again today folks. Mission update folks, we're cutting across this piece of land here. In the last clip we were up there, now look, we're coming back down into the Glen Clova side of the valley, and I'm thinking there's another track punches on down that way. I think there's a fair distance between the two paths. That's why I'm thinking we're best to go over this way to get to it. Check it out, folks, this is the kind of scene that I promise you. Not only this right here, but also look at this. We're at the edge of Loch Whittle, and look, we're on the high hill at the back of the loch with the cliffs, and look, the cars are waiting there at the roadside. We've come so far up from this high lands here. This is probably like 200 foot or more, this, maybe more, 300 or 400 foot, these cliffs at the back of the loch, and some of it drops straight down in. This is intense. I love to see it though, like we're so high above the waters of the loch. Here's Highlander, shout out. He was getting cramped, he's got a Capri Sun for the juice, folks. It's important to stay hydrated on these long walks, but now we've gotten to the actual path. This is the one here, I think, if we just stick on it, because I think it's dangerous if you go too near the edge of those bits. But there might be a wee waterway that goes down through. Check it out here, folks, Loch Whittle. I've pushed a wee bit further around the top, and look, we're right on the edge. That's bedrock here just dropping down, and it is crazy to look down on the waters. I can see the wind kind of blowing over the surface of the water. Anyway, I need to punch over here where Highlander is right now. I've kind of come onto the wild heather hill here. There is a risk of ticks within this landscape. We've been lucky today considering where we've walked, so I better not push my luck going this extra yard to get the footage. But I just love the scene, folks, and I just love the adventure, and that's what we're all about on this channel. So in the last clip, folks, we were up on the top of there. Look at the mad cliffs, and look at the big hole in the ground here where Loch Whittle sits. This is a whole different track to the way we came into this site, and it's cool to see. I'm proper soaked right now because I just got some of that water. There's a wee burn goes down with a waterfall, and I just got some of that water and put it right over my head. I was saying to Highlander how good it would be to go swimming in Loch Whittle after such a mad walk. It's crazy sometimes in the Scottish waters going for a swim. I don't really do it in the North Sea often, but I do enjoy it in like lochs or rivers. Anyway, look at it, we're punching along the rim of this kind of cliff top here. Look at this as well, folks, bog cotton. It's proper like a lamb's lug. It grows out here just all over the hill, and we've been seeing it the whole way around this adventure. We've walked so far, I can't even exaggerate to you on the video how far we've walked. I feel super refreshed since I just went and put that water over my head. I'm so refreshed. It's incredible to be like that, because I was overheating, like walking over that whole piece of land in the hot sunshine all day. This hat has also been a lifesaver today, but also that cool breeze that's been blowing through, that's been keeping us cool as we've walked this land. Highlander's got super sore legs, he was saying. He said he had cramp, but so far I'm just kind of pacing myself. Back there, going on the uphill sections, I had super sore calves, but that's because we just kept climbing and climbing and climbing hills, whereas now it's all downhill all the way down to the lower glen. But how crazy is this, folks? I can share places like this with people all over the world. Look at that, Glen Clova there with the hills, and then at this side, that cliff, that was why I first threw the camera on. I just love it, and shout out everybody that subscribes to the channel and comes along on these adventures through the medium of video. It's so windy here, folks. I've got the windsock on, but it's probably still super windy. This is us passing by Loch Whittle. We're at the lower height here. We've been right up to the highest height at the top of that cliff and beyond at that crazy plane crash, and now look, we're back passing the bothy. We're on to the lower section of the glen. Maybe one day when it's not so windy we'll come out up here and chill out of this loch. Yeah, look at it, look at the scene once you come around here. Check it out, folks, we've made it back down to the level of the main road in the glen, and what a crazy adventure it's been today. We've literally went up to see that Wellington Vickers bomber, is that what it's called? Yeah, Vickers Wellington bomber, and it's so cool that we were able to find that and document it on this adventure, and the crazy times we had trying to navigate over that land. Probably one of the hardest adventures we've been on the channel, and one of the maddest lands we've explored. It has been super windy, so I've not recorded too much down at this lower area, And yeah, I do apologise for the wind in adventures like this. Sometimes you hate to go into the craziest places. I do have a windsock on the camera, but it's just so extreme at times. And to see the plane, that's cool, to tell that story of the history, and to walk that extra mile just to see it properly and document the whole thing, the engines and the wee parts that remain on the hill. And then the interesting tail section, which is like 200 metres further over the hill. Another interesting thing to see the way the aircraft fuel looks like it's been running down out of that section where the plane crashed. And shout out Highlander 87 for locating it on his phone when we were up at the hilltop. Originally when I was here I felt sure I would be able to navigate to it, but then once we were up there I was unsure just exactly the correct direction, and that could mean a lot when you're on these wild remote lands. But here we are folks, we're back to the car in this windy landscape. I'm going to end it here. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye from me, goodbye from Highlander 87, and we'll catch you very soon for the next one, wherever we end up going.